Hey guys, I'm Jenny, Teleportation, and today we're looking at Tzeentch stuff. As the great Tzeentch worshipper Bob of Dylan once said, the times, they are a-changing. Clearly some ancient tongue, but, you know, Tzeentch stuff. Let's look at it. So, control, predict, and manipulate with Tzeentch on the campaign map. So first off, there is a trailer that is out now, which is actually on this blog page as well, so go watch that. I'm not going to go over it because I can never be bothered to go over trailers. It just seems like a lot of faff. But yeah, you can see a bunch of the units there, you know, no details about them. We can dig that stuff up, but anyone can look at an army book and dig that stuff up. I'm interested in what Total War is doing with this. So let's have a look, because these are campaign mechanics and I want to hear about them. So, Ben Barrett, once again, thank you for delivering us this lovely blog post. So, welcome back to the campaign mechanics roundups for factions in Total War Warhammer 3. We saw you coming. I'm sure they did. Spooky. Tzeentch is the god of change, manipulation, and magic, the great conspirator, the changer of ways. His intricate plans and endless schemes double back upon one another in a web of lies, half-truths, promises, and betrayal that would make any mortal's head spin. Kairos Fate Weaver, confirmed. We've all seen him, he's got two heads, you know, there's no mistake there. Legendarily powerful Lord of Change and Spellcaster Supreme, leads the Oracles of Tzeentch in an invasion of Cathay, and the rest of the world to follow shortly. Gotta go down the agenda, you know, there's Cathay, and whatever's next. So, today is the first time we're showing off what the monogod factions can get up to on the campaign map. That means showing the attributes they share alongside the ones that make them completely different, and so continuously at odds with one another. The great game is constantly played, and who is in the ascendant can have a significant effect on their armies and factions. While Tzeentch, and our other Chaos factions, feature only one legendary lord to begin with, the mechanics outlined below are defined as those specific to the god rather than Kairos. We'll detail him at a later date. I like that they're doing this. I like they're doing that. They're not going to conflate a bunch of stuff that way. So making that clear, what is, you know, faction and what is lord, I think that's really good. Because that could get real confusing real fast. So anyway, we'll detail him at a later date. Future DLC and FLC that aligns itself with Tzeentch will use some or all of these mechanics as well as that legendary lord specifics. We plan to support Total War Warhammer 3 for a long, long time onwards. They have foreseen it. Tzeentch jokes. So anyway, grimoires will be the first thing here. So as a god of knowledge, Tzeentch desires it above all else. Grimoires represent forbidden texts, hidden spellbooks, ancient lore, unknown histories, and everything else that is floating around the Warhammer world that is not commonly known. It is a favour with Tzeentch and can be used to ensure success. So first off, I really hope that the Books of Nagash find a way to overlap into this campaign, because if Tzeentch and, you know, Arcan, for instance, were vying over the same stuff, I think it could lead some interesting story stuff, as well as, you know, just being a fun way to reason a bunch of armies to get smashed together, you know. I think that's always good. So, grimoires are collected and generated by any number of actions: battles, building, sacking, settlements, dilemmas, and more. Dilemmas immediately just makes me very happy, because it means more events, you know, more story stuff there, more writing, more fluff, more stuff that makes the world come alive, more so than just like, here's an army, have a look at that. Doesn't really tell you much about the faction, but these dilemmas, I love those kind of systems, so I hope for more of that. I want a choose your own adventure book to coincide with my sandbox, you know. So, and more, don't know what that'll be, but more. Probably winning quest battles. You know, the story quest battles belonging to whatever faction you're, you know, whatever legendary lord you're playing as. But anyway, by themselves, they do very little. But you have an endless number of ways to spend them, and keeping a steady supply will make you a master of the world, even without your armies. That's interesting. That is super interesting. The idea of being able to master things without the need for armies. What exactly can you do with that forbidden knowledge? Changing of the ways. So here we've got Reveal Shroud, Force Rebellion. Stuff. This is like Tao Tao in Three Kingdoms. Reveal faction intentions, track army, halt faction, break alliance, give war coordination target, open gates, force a war, or transfer a settlement. Which is awesome and also really shocking, and I hate it. Because if there's a transfer settlement thing that's built into these mechanics, I don't know, it's weird. Do you think that that's just a way to force something that is a part of the new diplomacy systems, in which case transferring settlements is in the game? Or is it going to be one of those things where, because it's a faction-specific thing, they want to keep it faction-specific, therefore other factions won't be able to transfer settlements, like in previous Total War games? I don't know. I don't know. But this clearly looks like you spend money and it forces that, which is awesome. So I can't tell if this is a clue that we're getting that added into the diplomacies thing, or if that's a sign that we're not. Anyway, let me know what you reckon. So here you can see Dreaded Woe is obviously I'm assuming that's a faction? Dreaded Woe? I'm assuming that's a rebel Cathayan faction, but I mean, who can really say? Although it does look like a Chaos banner, so maybe that's Warriors of Chaos faction within Cathay. I'm not sure. But something. Reveal the shroud over all the factions' territory. So just remove the fog of war, which is really cool. So I like that. So you can spy on factions. And yes, that's clearly a faction. And I think that's a Chaos flag. It kind of looks like it. But anyway, the primary spend of the Grimoires is in the changing of ways. Sorry, of the ways. This is a series of actions unique to Tzeentchian factions that allows you to change or observe things on the campaign map with merely a wave of the wrist, causing a mouse click, usually. Each has a reasonable cooldown and costs a chunk of Grimoires. That's right, books come in chunks. Not shelves, chunks. So scaling with the severity and effectiveness of the action. Beyond the first. Each also requires a technology to unlock, some of which may be buried fairly deep in the tree. Here's a rundown of what's possible. So I really like this, because it's the idea of knowledge giving you access to greater tools. You know, ways that you can actually change the world. I think that's a really interesting way to do it, hide it behind research, because some of these can be pretty powerful. So I like the idea of there being additional sort of things that you have to prioritise in order to get them. That sounds like fun to me. So, transfer settlement. Transfer control and ownership of one settlement to a new faction. This can be your faction or another. Oh, but that's forced with currency, right? So that doesn't completely rule out the ability to be able to persuade people to do that in diplomacy, right? I mean, who knows? I really hope diplomacy gets like a real, kick up the arse, frankly. Diplomacy is shocking in Total War Warhammer. And yes, I know you want everyone to be at war, but also there is more intricacy to the culture and diplomacy in Warhammer, in the lore. It doesn't need to be... Because I have heard this excuse. I've heard people go, oh yeah, but it's Total War Warhammer, isn't it? Everyone's supposed to be at war with everybody. Yeah, they all have reasons to be. That's part of the fun, but it doesn't mean that they have to be at all times. So there can be some nuance, and I'd like to see it. So, open gates. Open the gates of a major settlement with walls for any battles in the settlement in the next few turns. That's really useful and just, a pretty classic sort of espionage thing, a kind of a staple in Total War games, but nice to see it. Force rebellion causes rebellion in the region, spawning an army for the owner to contend with. I imagine if it literally just triggers rebellion equals yes, I think that could be really interesting because it means that you're going to get a rebellion based on the corruption, right? So if you're able to cause a bunch of corruption due to things like osmosis, you might be able to spawn some really decent rebellions that are kind of your flavour. Whether or not you'll be sort of aligned with that rebellion or not is unlikely, but still, I think it could be quite interesting. Track army. You are given the line of sight of a target army. Reveal faction intentions, so it shows the plans of all armies a target faction controls. Now, I don't know exactly how that would play out. Because to me that feels like you'd have to have some additional UI element. Some signifier, to have the little arrows you have if you just if you click to move an army, but also if you hold right click and you can move your cursor around, see how much movement you're going to use, and you get the little arrow trail. Maybe it'll show those trails for all of the armies of the faction, so you know where they're going to go next turn. Maybe something like that? Or maybe it'll just be something will be highlighted if they're going to attack it. I don't know. Could be interesting. I'd like to know how they're going to display that, but that does lead to some interesting possibilities for just espionage for all factions, really. So, you know, future DLC and modding and all sorts. So, Revealed Shroud gives complete vision of a target faction's territory, just gives you line of sight over their stuff. I mean, that's something that already happens with trade partners for the High Elves, for instance, so it's pretty standard stuff, but useful for Tzeentch. Halt faction, all characters, so armies and heroes, have their movement halted or disabled for the faction's following turn. That is super powerful. Just catch out units, stop them invading you, whatever the hell you want to do. Or if they're going to get attacked by some other faction, then you can pin them in place so they get screwed over by, you know, someone who isn't you, just because you know it'll do a lot of harm to them. Give war coordination target, gives a faction a war coordination target, even if they're not your ally. That I think is really fun. And I hope that's a bit more robust, because a lot of the time you'll give a war coordination target to someone, and the AI will just ignore you for like 50 turns. And then you'll just get a pop-up going, oh, they've gone for it. It's like, okay, great. Kind of irrelevant now, but sure. Thanks, guys. Break alliance. Break the military or defensive alliance between two factions. That's a big deal. Very Tzeentchy. And force a war. Force a war between two factions. Very, very Tzeentchy. As you can imagine, this can get hectic, manipulative, and downright scummy depending on your desires and plans. While it's unlikely you will be able to get all of your goals completed without ever annihilating an enemy army yourself, it gives several fascinating possibilities to the mid to late game. Even early, transferring settlements between factions you're not interested in warring with to ones you're about to conquer can be very powerful. Yeah, I hadn't really thought of that. That's kind of nice. So if you're in a position where it's like, oh no, a certain faction is sort of overlapping an area, so I won't be able to get the whole commandery. And I am going to use the word commandery. I know that's the 3K word for province, but we've been talking about Cathay a lot recently, and they use the term commanderies. So I'm going to use commandery, because, you know, feeling exotic. So anyway, so sometimes you might not be able to get the whole monopoly, you know? And so just getting that to swap, it lets you get control over the whole territory, which is really cool. It's a really fun idea. So, Winds of Magic Manipulation. Very Tzeentchy. Very Tzeentchy indeed. Oh, these vistas are just amazing. Just stunning terrain. But that's the thing, they can do literally anything they want, now that they've got the Realms of Chaos, you know. And even just the influence of Chaos being very felt in the mortal plane, you know. It's, yeah, so cool. So, another ability unique to Tzeentch is his specific control of the Winds of Magic. Indeed, so tied are his machinations to them that many buildings have unique effects when the Winds of Magic are particularly strong, increasing their capabilities. This is nice. This is a nice idea, because the Winds of Magic, you do get a pop-up occasionally going, oh, there's a lot of winds now, and it kind of feels a bit pointless, right? It's not something that you really check, because you just sort of make do. So the idea of the Winds of Magic being something that really feels like it has an impact outside of battle sounds really good. I really like that. So to this end, Tzeentch can reduce the Winds of Magic in one province where he has a settlement to increase it in another at will, which is very cool. As well as providing the aforementioned buffs to his buildings, this allows for armies with multiple spellcasters, that's going to be quite a lot of your Tzeentch armies, believe it or not, to benefit heavily in terms of power reserves available to them. Very fun. It's also worth noting that there have been some large changes made to the nature of the Winds of Magic and power reserves in battle, which we will detail soon. The upshot of this, the upshot is that this ability should never be discounted to ensure victory. That sounds great, because, like I said, Winds of Magic feel a bit like, they don't feel like they're a big difference, you know, sort of, you know, on the campaign map. They don't feel like they have a lot of bearing on the battles. You just sort of make do with what you get. Like I said, you know, it never really comes into your tactics. You know, do I want to attack here? No, the Winds of Magic are very strong. You never do that. If any of you guys have ever done that, it was probably really early on when you saw it was a thing, and then you realised it kind of doesn't matter anyway, and then ignored it forever afterwards, you know. So, Corruption, Unholy Manifestations, and the Great Game. And I love this. I love this guy covered in claws and teeth, but he's got a knife. I just love that. I love Warhammer. It's so silly and awesome and goofy and villainous and dumb and clever. It's a good one. So, the Great Game never ceases between the Chaos Gods. It represents their endless attempts to one-up each other. The endless infighting of chaos that ensures that even should they dominate the world, it is unlikely to ever know peace. Sounds about right. Even the gods that can stand each other rarely see eye to eye, and alliances are rarer than a surprised Lord of Change. Because they're never surprised, you see. So, thus, It is represented in Warhammer 3 as which god is in the Ascendant, powering up all their factions on the map. This is in the form of improvements to Unholy Manifestations, 4 free abilities available to every demon faction, which are unlocked as the faction's corruption spreads through the world. Yes, corruption is now split between general chaos corruption and the 4 types, 1 for each god. But we kind of knew that anyway, just from the UI that we saw in the Cathay mechanics. We saw that they had that split up, which is really cool. Good to see that, you know, that's going to really play a part in the mechanics rather than just being flavour, I suppose. So that's nice. So we'll detail this another time. But what you need to know right now is that the Unholy Manifestations unlock as more corruption for your god is spread across the land. The upgraded versions have heavier effects, generating more of a resource or dealing more damage to an enemy. For example, here's the Unholy Manifestations for Tzeentch. Scriveners of Insanity, unlocked from the start, allows a friendly army to generate a big batch of grimoires over the course of several turns. The army cannot move during this time, and must be in enemy territory, so like a unique raid stance where they're literally just plundering it for knowledge. That is really cool, and that is such a nice way to sort of differentiate the faction, because raiding is something that you kind of expect from Chaos, but Tzeentch doesn't care for mere baubles. You know, what is valuable to a mortal is not valuable to him. So the idea of looting in that kind of way is it's not to continue the war effort by getting new arms and armor and, you know, magical weaponry would be pretty down his alley. But yeah, just trying to find knowledge, getting all these grimoires. I think it's really cool. So mutagenic energies requires 1500 global Tzeentch corruption. I mean, we don't know what the breakdown of it is, but I'm presuming that it's like 100 per. Like 100 possible corruption per settlement, just because that's kind of the scale for corruption generally, but they may have completely reconfigured that. But I think 15 settlements, you know, ruined, sounds like fairly good pacing to unlock another one. I mean, 15 settlements isn't huge, but that's enough to be like, okay, that's a landmark. So, don't know, maybe not. And it's global corruption, actually. So that's not just your territories, that's all of the Tzeentch faction's territories, which there are more than one. So that's kind of interesting. So there's actually reason to work with your allies. Well, not work with your allies, but work with other people that are fighting on the same team. Of course, that doesn't stop you fighting them because you want to look the shiniest and the most impressive to your Chaos God, so you can get the most gifts. You don't really want some other person being a rival within even your own faction as Chaos. They're kind of jerks. So anyway, causes a target army suffer attrition for a turn regardless of situation or immunities, which is kind of fun, but only one turn doesn't seem like a lot, but maybe you can trigger this quite often. Magic Flare requires 3000 global Tzeentch corruption, increases the range and barrier hit points of all units in the army. Barrier is a special shield all Tzeentch units have. We'll detail this further in the upcoming roster reveal. So this sounds very interesting, because to me that feels like essentially just like temporary hit points, additional temporary hit points. I'm assuming that's what it would be, but it could be specifically to ward off magic or something. There's a few different things I could do with it, but the idea of having sort of a completely sort of magic-fueled army, just having some kind of shield from enemies, sounds interesting, because they're not concerned with like covering themselves in heavy armor, are they? No, it's kind of magic that they use to keep in the fight. So that's really cool. That could be really interesting. So, Night of Madness. That sounds like a fun time. Requires 6,000 global Tzeentch corruption. Target friendly army generate. It should be like the target friendly army. Anyway, I'm being pedantic. The target friendly army generates Tzeentch corruption and control, renamed from public order, loss in a province, as well as increasing the army's Winds of Magic power reserve. It cannot move during these turns. So that's an interesting note, actually, renamed from public order, because I did see that it was control for Cathay, and I mentioned that did kind of spell out, more of what their culture was about. It's not about just keeping them happy, it's about keeping them in line, right? But it seems they've just chosen to swap public order for control, generally, even though control was the word they used for Bretonia, to show that kind of relationship between its rulers and its people. So it says rename from public order. Is that a global change they've done? Or is that literally just they've done it for Tzeentch because it makes more sense for Tzeentch to have that. You're not keeping them happy, you're keeping them, you know, in line. So I don't know. We'll have to wait and see for that. But either way, you guys know the gist. You know, control, public order, whatever. You get the idea. So, and control loss in a province, as well as increasing the army's winds of magic power reserve. It cannot move during these turns. Interesting. So it adds a bunch of nonsense, like it's a defensive thing that buffs the area it's in. So that's kind of cool. Of course, as corruption spreads, it has more of an impact than that. Ooh, cults. Now this sounds awesome to me, because you can't have chaos without it influencing the wider world, and cults is how they get a sort of get their hooks in, you know, into everything. That's how they sort of spread their influence, which gives them more power than just the sort of I guess the martial strength that the cults have within that city. It's that spreading of that belief system that empowers them, that enables them to spread their influence, and you know, it empowers them in the realms of chaos. It allows them to push more magic into the world to get demons going, you know. Cults do a lot of the legwork because they're mortals, you know. They aren't concerned with being able to exist in our world because they're mortals, they're not demons. So they can get a lot of the legwork done. So I love that this is actually getting some mechanics, because they could have easily just focused on the armies. But yeah, this is awesome. Well, it might be awesome. It's awesome that they've done something about it, but we'll have to see what they've done about it. I'll start reading now. You're welcome. So, as well as the passive effects of high corruption, which are unique to each god, cool, and will be detailed down the line, cults can form once a god is particularly dominant in a region. This cult becomes a foreign building slot owned by you that can construct unique buildings based on your dedicated god. So, there's big incentives to spread corruption in enemy territory, which is very cool. So, Tzeentch's options are Sanctuary, generates grimoires per turn, so it makes sense, you just got, you know, just a little safe space for the cultists to bring back any goodies they find. A repository generates more grimoires per turn, but requires high winds of magic. Huh, interesting. I wonder what the lore reasons are for that. I wonder. It's like a bigger library, you know. A sanctum. I mean, these all feel like very much the same, just a lot of words for basically the same things, but oh well. Sanctum generates a decent amount of income, but also requires high winds of magic. And Campus destroys the cult, but increases winds of magic here and in all adjacent to Tempestuous. What? Oh, okay, so destroys the cult. A campus. But a campus is a place where people live. It's not like, oh, you've gone to the university campus. The university is destroyed now. What? So I don't quite understand that. I'd like to see a description of the you know, the buildings being built to give it some context. But yeah, really cool idea though, just to go, okay, cult, spread, you know, really ruin everything. Do let your machinations come to fruition and channel magic through this area so the demons can rise and lay waste to everything. You know, that old chestnut. So you probably don't require the entire knowledge base of Tzeentch to understand the strategy here, but naturally it all depends on where your cults develop and what you're in need of. Generating huge amounts of grimoires can be far more valuable than income after all, particularly in the late game. Teleportation. I loved the teleportation mechanics with Oxyotl. I know they were very limited to like story stuff, and I also really liked it for Wood Elves being able to hop between their different, you know, sanctuaries or sanctums or campuses. You know what I mean. So unique to Tzeentch and unlocked through the tech tree, his armies can go into the teleport stance. This costs winds of magic reserve power to adopt, but is exceptionally powerful. Okay, so there's a magic cost to things on the campaign map, which sounds really cool. Not only does it allow crossing, I mean, okay, it says cost wind of map power reserve. It could just be like when you go into the geomantic web stance or whatever, or the channeling stance, it just does the opposite. Instead of giving you more for when you're in battle, you have less. I mean, it could just be that boring, but it could be you know, actually like emptying a tank more in campaign map, because it is being overhauled, so we can't entirely speculate, but I don't know, we'll see. Not only does it allow crossing of impassable terrain, say mountain ranges, rivers, patrolled areas, but instantly triggers an ambush battle should you target an enemy army. Wow. That is really cool. So it's like underway stance, but as an ambush. That is really cool. It's a one-shot move, so you must readopt the stance if you wish to go again on the next turn. But getting to ambush armies as you like can really swing a war your way. Yeah. This level of power is why it is locked in the later game for Tzeentch, requiring various texts to unlock. Aw. Still, that's so cool. Speaking of which, here's the tech tree. I can't read that. Hang on 1 minute. Okay, so here is enlarged. So we have Tomatic Focus, Arcane Surge, Gift of Mutation, Fires of Change, Teleport right in the middle, costs 100 grimoires, and is locked, though won't tell us why. And Way of Deception, Cult Whisperer, Secret of Chrysopia, Locus of Transmogrification, and it looks like we start off in the middle and we go off either side, which is a really interesting dynamic. Metallurgical Morphism, Way of Time, Pestilent Hatred, Way of Manipulation. Behind my head we've got Exalted Locus of Conjuration, Glean Magic. I've only got half a head now. I'll lean this way so it looks less strange. Glean Magic, Way of Deceit, Greater Locus of Change, and Way of War. So you can see some of these have different grimoire costs, and some of them just follow on from each other, which is interesting. So the idea of there being like little boundaries to unlock further chains, I think is kind of nice. Also, we can see that the odd one also has building requirements as well. So some interesting stuff there. Nothing else we can really get from all of this, but it does have some flavour text at the bottom. 9 is the number of the changer. 9 are the levels within the perplexing 9th library. Tzeentch's repository of forgotten knowledge. Scour the bookcases, learn and indulge in your master's lore. It's a bit sad that it doesn't say 9th library or something at the top of the screen. It just says technology, but I guess they can change that, right? So we'll see. Anyway, back to the blog. Alright, so Tzeentch's tech tree is a bit more of a tech web, spreading out from the centre point like a spider's home, which I think is a nice sort of way to summarise him, because he's got his fingers in so many pots, you know, which I think is kind of interesting for him to go for like all knowledge. It's not just like a linear thing of like, let's just keep improving upon this thing. It's I must know all, which sounds really good. So I like that. So nothing the Changer of Ways does is ever simple or straightforward. Each area, I don't know why it's in a, you could just say area. I don't think it needs to be in quotes, does it? I wouldn't have thought. Anyway, each area of the tree is unlocked by, I mean, really it should be tree, because it's not a real tree, right? Each area of the tree is unlocked by one of the central techs, and then has a couple of looping paths through it leading to a final tech. This means you're rarely going to take the exact same path through the tech tree on 2 playthroughs unless you have an exact composition and plan in mind. Interesting. It's also worthy of study to find which prerequisites might point you in specific directions. That's definitely going to be something that's going to trip me up, because I tend to live in the moment far too much, which is not very Tzeentchy. But you never know, depending on the mechanics, I might be encouraged to actually, you know, kind of invest in long-term planning. Because a lot of the time it's just long-term planning really doesn't bear fruit in Total War a lot of the time. Most of the time it's just like, you've got to be quite reactionary because the game is I don't know, there's a certain thing about Total War, long-term plans never seem to work out, because just some random idiot will declare war on you, you know, another naval will just go, you know what, screw it, I'm going to ruin all your plans. So you can never really rely on plans, you know, best laid plans of mice and men, I suppose. So anyway, it's also worth noting that along with unique Changer of Ways text you might unlock, there are several other areas that are uncommon or unique choices. Various texts will give spells to all your Lords of Change, letting you field an entire army of powerful, monstrous spellcasters even without filling your hero slots, and then becoming more powerful over the course of the game. Finally, with knowledge so key to Tzeentch, he has an endless number of ways to increase research rate, including commandments, buildings, and more regular things like hero actions. With a dedicated plan, you will blitz through the tech tree and be fielding cheap, effective, and devastating armies earlier than your opponents. Interesting. I like it. So, yeah. Just it all sounds so appropriate to Tzeentch. I really like that. And of course, this is nothing to speak of all of the interesting things that Kairos Fateweaver might be able to bring to the table. So really cool stuff. I'm really excited for this. I really am. Oh, I don't know what to say. In summary, it's awesome, and I can't wait to hear more of it. The other stuff it's hinting at is amazing. So the overhauls for things like Winds of Magic, stuff like that, corruption mechanics. These things are things that I think just like... To me, I just felt like, oh, they're like that, so whatever, right? They didn't really strike me as something that needed changing, but having read this is something that could easily be improved upon. They are very simple systems that don't really offer much in the way of strategy. They're just there, you know? They're just there. You don't react to them, they're just there. The only thing that you really get in terms of strategy is, oh, this place is very corrupt because it's not where I'm supposed to be living. I guess I'll build a temple building. It's a bit boring. It's not much to go on. It's not much to react to. You know, corruption could be way more interesting. But the idea of, you know, there could be cults growing here because of that. I mean, I imagine, just for simplicity, the same mechanics with cults, I imagine, will be similar to what are they called? Undercities. Or Sanctums, I guess, for Oxyotl. But I imagine it'll be a similar mechanic, and you'll probably discover them in the exact same way that you would, you know, on Pirate Coves as well. But I imagine you discover them the same way as you would with the Undercities, by building that building that gives you much higher discoverability for those things. I imagine it'll be a similar way to combat them. But there's going to be more cases where you're like, oh, I'm bordering chaos, I need to build those buildings. So I think it'd be really some interesting stuff anyway that can come out of an overhaul. There's definitely more they can do with it, and I can't wait to hear about it. But what I've heard so far about Tzeentch sounds really, really cool. Really cool indeed. And I can't wait to see their faction in more detail. Trailer's awesome. Go watch the trailer if you haven't already. It's really cool. Anyway, guys, if you enjoyed this, comment, like, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. Take care, guys.